There is only one download link to this forgotten first-person shooter game, and even then, you'd be pirating it.
Hey, Skunjili!
This is Revenge, and its sequel, Revenge 2, made by the Padide team in Iran, which translates to original. We're gonna talk about just how original this game series is later. Released in 2012, these games were Iran's response to the first-person shooter gaming market. They tried to not only become a new genre in Iran's game design, but also find their way up there with popular shooters like Call of Duty and Battlefield. Bit of a tall task to clear, especially when your team consists of only 15 people. But hey, I digress. It's incredibly hard to get your hand on either of these games because they're not on Steam, or Epic Games, or any other launcher. They only had a physical disc release 13 years ago, and I remember actually buying Revenge 2 for 5,000 toman, which at the time would have been worth $1.50, but now it's worth about 4 cents.
You wake up when the alarm goes off. You go to your job.
The reason I only bought Revenge 2 is because the first one is the vaguest and most unknown video game ever made. I have never actually seen this game physically, and there are only 6 images of Revenge on the entire internet. And they're all so low quality that you can barely read anything from them. There's one that showcases the back of the box, and it has this image on it, and right under it is an image taken during production where we can see the green screen. Why is this on the back of the box that is supposed to showcase the actual gameplay and not the production process? I have no idea. I actually went through the Iranian gamer discussion boards from a decade ago, and even they have no idea if the first Revenge game actually existed. Some of them assumed that the team simply made Revenge, realized it's so bad, and just moved to the sequel without releasing the original.
This is trash!
And I'm not sure if I should consider myself lucky or unlucky, but a decade later, I actually found Revenge on the internet. Before we start, I just want to thank my one and only Patreon Nexizel for single-handedly supporting the channel. He's feeling a bit lonely. Maybe you'd like to join him right up there. In fact, I will personally kiss anyone who joins my Patreon on the mouth. You know, when you want to design a video game, you'd want to actually model things. You're gonna need character models, item models, entire environment models. Some teams prefer to go for a 3D model design. Some go for 2D, which takes form in a variety of different styles, like pixel art or hand drawings. But folks behind Revenge, they thought different. They were just one level above us mere mortals with our limited minds. So they just skipped over the modeling part.
Dr. House, if you're gonna save this patient, you'll need this. Get this thing out of my sight!
Revenge and Revenge 2 don't have a single model or sprite for anything, because the entire game is based on full motion video. GameFA website, which is supposed to be a reliable source for Iranian gamers, claims that these games are in high definition. I don't want to call you a liar, but I can count the fucking pixels on the screen. I should warn you that these games are entirely in Persian, with no language options or subtitles of any other languages, not even English, which should tell you how high their hopes were for these games. They weren't really planning for anyone outside of Iran to play these games, or even anyone inside of Iran, since I'm pretty sure me making this video is the only form of marketing this game ever received, aside from this Iranian guy making a video on it before me, which that's a great thumbnail. Let's talk about the main menu first. I'm not sure if I can play the menu music, because the team behind it doesn't have a soundtrack designer, and I'm sure they don't own any of the music they used in the game. But for our purposes, you might as well just imagine the music as a piece of trash. You can tell they were trying to make one of those game menus where the camera is positioned in a specific area, and if you were to click on one of the options, it would take take you to another location in that general premise. One of the games that I remember actually doing this is Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, but in that game, the areas behind each menu made a little bit of sense. Here on Revenge, it just shows different parts of this guy. It's so funny to me that when you want to go back to the main menu, the footage just kinda cuts. There's no attempt at masking it or anything. The immersion is just on my room's floor right now. The About Us option just rolls the credits, which I guess it is about you, but I didn't actually learn anything. I just learned your names now, which I'll forget by the end of this sentence. Moving on to the actual game, things just keep getting worse. The entire game is an ammo overlay on a video with a crosshair mouse cursor. When you actually manage to shoot someone, the game simply just cuts from one recording to another one. So it's as if there are these invisible play buttons on different parts of the screen, and you're just supposed to click them to play the next video. I know it's called a video game, but I think they relied on the video part a bit too much. The game starts off with this first-person driving scene, and I'm pretty sure it's just one guy on the back seat holding the camera on the driver's neck like this. I don't know why, it just sounds so funny to me. But then, something terrible happens. There are men in your house kidnapping your son. So you grab your gun and see the smoothest transition from cutscene to gameplay. This level of smoothness even Rockstar games can't achieve. To give them credit, neither of the Revenge games have any loading screens, which I assume is because there isn't anything to load in these games. You go upstairs and shoot the guy kidnapping your son, which doesn't actually do anything because the actor didn't get shot in the video. Another gunman shows up and you shoot him. And that's it. That's the first level of the game. You just click on the screen once and it's over. It turns out that this guy that we have been staring at on the menu is actually the protagonist of the game. It's the poster boy right up there on the Revenge 2 poster. His name is actually Moziar, but I didn't know that because no one ever calls you in the entire game. I learned it from the credits. And this guy has Christian Bale's Batman voice. You're probably wondering what the premise of the game even is, and I'm not gonna lie, I went through both games while being perfectly fluent in Persian, and I still had no fucking idea what is going on. I know bits and pieces, but when you put them together, it makes no sense. It's like trying to remember a dream. So I'm not even going to explain the plot, I'm just gonna run you through this story and let you try to make sense of it yourself. So Marziar interrogates the gunman. Impeccable acting right there. We then see a flashback in which you betray your partner during a deal and leave with the money. And they already broke the fourth wall by looking into the camera. You might think that these guys are popular Iranian actors as a way to, you know, promote the game, like Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk or Giancarlo Esposito in Far Cry 6. Well, these guys are not famous actors or second-tier actors or even actors at all. I have no idea who they are. I looked up their names and the Revenge games are the only projects they have ever been in, or at least that's what I'm assuming, because when I put their names in Google, my computer just told me, dude, what the f is Revenge? You make it to a garden house and interrogate one of the guards. Who actually wrote this dialogue?
Is Jefferson in there?
I don't know.
I said, is Jefferson in there?
Yes. I guess that was supposed to show how intimidating our protagonist here is, because when I see this, I just wet myself. You make it into the garden and an epic action sequence begins. This is where you learn that Revenge is not a first-person shooter, it's a memorization game. You simply keep restarting until you manage to click every correct pixel in the correct order. Oh, and there's no checkpoints, so every time you get shot, it just cuts straight back to... Don't forget, this gameplay right here that you're witnessing is supposed to rival big names like Call of Duty. I'm only using Black Ops 2 footage because at the time it was the most recent Call of Duty out there. But I can very well use footage from the very first Call of Duty ever made and it still looks and feels a million times better than this.
What were they thinking?
Eventually, you confront Jefferson. The CGI could have used some improvement.
Jefferson! Bienvenue à Vazi!
Can we just take a moment to talk about how this guy is called Jefferson in Iran and every other character has an Iranian name? They couldn't be bothered to at least record multiple videos based on where the player shoots the enemy. This guy, for example, it doesn't matter where you aim. As soon as you fire, the game will treat it as if you shot the gun out of his hand. But maybe I'm thinking too much about a game that doesn't have volume sliders. There he is, Jefferson, the evil kingpin. An epic showdown begins, and Maziar must face his nemesis. Boom! You shoot him, he rolls. Boom! You shoot him again, he doesn't give up and rolls. Boom! Another shot! What just happened? I did not mess up there. This boss fight, if you can even call it that, needs you to keep targeting Jefferson's head. But the fifth target is simply just broken. I've tried every single pixel on the screen, just so that maybe by chance they have messed up the hitbox. But no, that's as far as you can play the game. That was Revenge, I guess. I mean, to be fair, they didn't say you were actually gonna get Revenge. I can't really tell why Revenge 2 was even released. It's hard to imagine that the original one made them a whole lot of money, or any money at all, considering people didn't even know it existed. But at the end of the day, Revenge 2 was made, and it was actually a step up from the original one. And I'm not just talking about the fact that the game has actual volume sliders this time around. There is one article over at Soft98, which is another supposedly Iranian news source for gaming. And this is it. You'd be generous to even call it a paragraph. But to translate it for you, it basically says, the Iranian game, Revenge, is the first movie-style game in Iran. In the second installment of this game, a lot of new features were added, some of which are as follows. Control over camera movement, the gun is now in user interface, whatever that means, the ability to carry multiple weapons at the same time, auto health regeneration, branched path selection, and, I'm not making this up, quick time events. Yes, these guys actually listed adding quick time events as a new feature, unlike every game that tries to get rid of them.
Help! Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
Oh yeah, by the way, they didn't actually call them QuickTime events, they called them button pressing. All of these new features have been implemented in the most garbage way possible, but before we get to the game itself, let's take a look at the box cover of this one too. On the front, we see this absolutely hard image, which I couldn't resist and had to use as my wallpaper, and on the top, it says Games for Windows. I don't think the person who designed this had any idea what Games for Windows even is. They probably thought that it means that this game runs on Windows. On the back of the box, we see this slogan, National Production promotes Iranian job and funding. Which really tells you the quality of this national product when they have to resort to preaching, this is really good guys because it's made in Iran. What? The actual game isn't good? Who cares about that? It's made in Iran, which means we will grow as a society. Because that is something the gamer audience really cares about. Because the 10-year-old me really cared about the job funding. Revenge 2 starts off in a nightmare sequence that, I kid you not, actually plays Gordon Ramsay's violin unironically. Then you wake up and realize you were actually this very criminal looking guy from the original game, even though that hand overlay with its perfectly cut green screen border clearly belongs to the actual protagonist. Oh wait, that's what they meant when they said the gun is now in user interface?
اینجا کجاست؟
تاریخ مصرفم که واسه سالار تموم شده.
Hold on a minute. This isn't the same voice as the one in the original Revenge.
جفرسون بیا بیرون عوضی.
این که الان زنده ای تلافی اونه که قالت گذاشت. بگو پسرم چجوری.
So you're telling me someone on the team actually thought that the knockoff Christian Bale voice was more fitting than the actor's real voice? So to talk about the story, the plot is building on what happened at the end of the original Revenge, which we don't know because we couldn't get past the second level. Apparently Maziar did not manage to save his kidnapped son in the original game, and this criminal looking guy that we betrayed before also got betrayed by the mob he was in. Yeah, everyone in this world just fucking hate this guy.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Long story short, Maziar somehow ends up rescuing this guy after the mob betrayed him. And the criminal dude makes him an offer. I will help you find your son, and you will help me get back at my mob boss by getting revenge. This is where you get to see all the brand new features they added in the game, like the camera control, which means they zoomed in a little bit on the recorded footage to let it slide around when you move the cursor. This is completely useless, by the way. At no point during the entire game will you come across an enemy that needs you to move the camera. You can even move the screen when the game is paused. Whoever coded this has a lot of explaining to do. Actually, who did code this? SAH Anonymous. Fuck you, SAH Anonymous. There is a reload animation this time that actually takes time, which means you will have to reload correctly between encounters or you will get shot. Now you might be wondering about that so-called health regeneration and where? How? What health regeneration? You have exactly 1 second to react to each enemy, and if you don't, you get shot. You don't have a health bar for it to regenerate. And the quick time events? Well, they are pretty self-explanatory. Surprisingly enough, the button prompts actually change with each run, so there's your replay value, I guess. The branched path selection mechanic is... it's kinda useless. Sometimes you come across a segment where you can go one of the two directions, and you fight the exact same amount of enemies either way, with some minor difference. Nothing even changes based on whichever path you choose. Detroit Become Human is in shambles with Revenge 2's branched path mechanic. You can tell they were at least trying to make the game more appealing, but the core idea of the game doesn't give them a whole lot of wiggle room, and you will really notice that when you take a look at this game's weapon variety. They added a shotgun and an assault rifle to the game, which you can actually use for one level, and they play exactly like the pistol. You can still one-shot everyone, and you can only shoot each target individually. So if you were to use the shotgun, for example, you are not gonna damage multiple enemies at the same time, because the game was designed around full motion video, which means the background is a pre-recorded footage and the gun is just an overlay. The full motion video game style can work if utilized well. I played another game recently called The Complex, which was in the choice-based choose your own adventure genre, and that game actually used the full motion video pretty well, because you made decisions and simply watched their outcome. But full motion video simply doesn't translate well to a first-person shooter, because just like I said before, it creates a memorization game that has you go through levels again and again until you memorize where each enemy spawns and just click on them. And just when I was getting used to the stinky piece of trash that this game is, it suddenly just changed genres. and turn into a side-scroller which runs with 1 frame per sometimes. I have no idea why the game genre suddenly changed. I'm assuming they just ran out of locations to record more levels. But what is even worse is how bad this side-scroller plays. There is zero strategy, literally zero. Every time you see an enemy, it's just a shooting match to see who goes down first. And I'm not sure if you can even fail, because I seem to be tanking all of their bullets. But then, the final boss of Revenge 2 appears. This is the moment that everything we have been through has been leading up to. Jamal with his machine gun. Oh, apparently they can actually take you down. They programmed a cover system in the game, which would actually add a layer to the gameplay, but this is the only part in the entire game where you get to use it. I guess programming a bunch of more pillars was harder than giving the player a ridiculous amount of health. So then we steal the data to blackmail the big mafia boss, and we escape the building, and we pull over to the side of a highway with our guns just in our hands in public view. Then we call the mafia boss to trade the data for your son, and then we see a sniper holding an angle on us, and then he shoots and it ends. Wait, it ends? Just like that? You might think this is a cliffhanger for the very anticipated Revenge 3, but it's not. I've read every article available on this game series, and Revenge 2 was meant to be the last one. This is just how the story ends, with nothing getting resolved. You don't rescue your son, or take down the mafia boss. What even was the point of anything in these games? At the end of the day, it was Jefferson who had the last laugh. Some of you watching this might think I'm being a bit too harsh on them. Maybe they were trying something new instead of going the generic direction of game design. Maybe they did have a creative idea that hasn't been done before. Well, I'm sorry to grab your optimism and throw it in the trash, but these guys didn't do anything new or innovative. Let me take you on a trip back in history for the 4% of people that hasn't still clicked off the video.
It is a cacophony of sounds from a symphony of electronics. If you're filling your time capsules these days, don't forget a bit of Frogger, or Mousetrap, or Grand Champion, or Pac-Man, or Ms. Pac-Man.
Using full motion videos inside a video game is really common nowadays, but back in the earlier stages of gaming, somewhere around the 1990s, being able to actually use a full motion video in a video game was unheard of. It was such a big deal that we had whole game consoles just basing their entire marketing around it. Back then, a lot of games managed to make good use of the full motion video within the borders of gameplay. One of the most popular examples being Dragon's Lair, which combined colorful cartoon graphics with gameplay elements. But at the same time, we had a lot of FMV games that had interesting ideas but couldn't really pair them up with full motion videos, like the infamous Night Trap that had you playing as a security guard, switching between cameras to catch burglars. But since each camera was a pre-recorded video, it was really hard to synchronize them with gameplay, and most of the time, the player struggled to keep up with each camera. So basing an entire game around full motion video back then was a bit of a tricky move, but it was even more tricky when it came to first-person shooters. This is well before my time, but American Laser Games seems to be the first, or at least the most popular, to utilize full motion videos in first-person shooters, and it seems like folks over at Padide Studio got their idea for Revenge from them. American Laser Games made titles like Space Pirates, Crime Patrol, and Mad Dog McCree. Even back then, these games came down to mostly being just memory games. You keep repeating a level until you just happen to memorize where every single enemy is going to spawn. But they had a level of charm and never actually took themselves as seriously as a game like Revenge did. Not to mention, they were running on arcade machines that supported light guns.
次にダックハント。1人はコントローラーでカモを操り、1人はハンター。
These games were made with a higher level of attention to detail when compared to Revenge. One of the most noticeable examples of this was the fact that you can almost never see more than one enemy on the screen, which is because they didn't want the footage continuity to break, something folks behind Revenge didn't care about, and because of that, every time there's more than one enemy on the screen, shooting one will immediately make the footage cut obvious with the other one. Eventually the world moved on and arcades became less common. These games were ported to other home platforms, which almost none of them ran as good as it did on the original hardware. So at this point, people just had a bunch of memory games played on smaller screens without the light guns that ran like shit. And the world wasn't going to wait for American laser games to catch up.
I'm here for the PlayStation 2.
With the release of new consoles, there came an entire generation of rail shooters that completely ditched the live-action format and instead went with the 3D models, increasing the bar of quality significantly when compared to American laser games. This got American laser games into full bankruptcy and got them buried under a whole lot of lost money. I had to tell you all of that, just so you would know that folks behind Revenge, who developed the game in 2012, were rehashing a game idea from over 2 decades before them, which was so unwanted that one of the primary game studios that made them went bankrupt. You have to consider the fact that Iran is a third world country, and at the time, it was behind on just how far the gaming technology had developed.
بازی‌های رایانه‌ای ضمن اینکه مضرات زیادی داره، ولی اصل این کارها و این بازی‌ها برای اوقات فراغت سیستم‌های انسانی طراحی شده. منتها دولت‌های استکباری در کنار این موضوعات اومدن ورود کردن برای استحاله فرهنگی. این استحاله را از روی کودکان شروع کردن.
When this was the cultural view on the video games at the time, you have to understand that the concept of an Iranian gaming studio publishing an actual video game was unheard of. It was insane. It wasn't like nowadays that Iran has a whole gaming market and a variety of developers making their own franchises. And that right there is my bald friend who works overtime for minimum wage in this video game store. F's in the chat for him. People behind the Revenge games back then really tried to take advantage of this lack of knowledge and pretended like they just came up with something new by labeling it the first Iranian film-based game. That title is not impressive when you realize that the number of Iranian games as a whole back then wouldn't even reach 2 digits. To end things on a happy note, at least the gaming community has grown in Iran over the course of years, and both gamers and developers are now much more aware, and that is my bald friend again. There's also a banner of GTA 6 here, which based on my information will have drivable cars. In fact, I remember playing an Iranian mobile game way back called 41148, which was more so a basic puzzle horror with an interesting art style and storyline. So the scope is still not that big, but it's growing at a snail pace.
Slow down! I want to get there, but I want to get there alive!
That is not to say that I forgive the Patty Day studio. I had to spend my allowance to buy this pile of trash back in 2012, and I need that money back. So maybe it's time for you to get my revenge from their studio by checking out my Patreon. Take care, love you so much. Mwah.